Now is the time to get your favorite blanket and get your favorite cup of your favorite beverage, whether it be coffee or tea or hot chocolate, depending on where you live, because it might not be cold enough for any of that. Who knows? Get your nice cuddly blanket and sit back and listen. And today I will be reading from Good Omens, novel by Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett, which has now later been adapted to a series on Amazon Prime. And here we begin. I hope y'all enjoy. The intro is the authors would like to join the Demon Crowley in dedicating this book to the memory of G.K. Chesterton, a man who knew what was going on. In the beginning. It was a nice day. All the days had been nice. There had been rather more than 7 of them so far, and rain hadn't even been invented yet. But clouds massing east of Eden suggested that the first thunderstorm was on its way, and it was going to be a big one. The angel of the eastern gate put his wings above his head to shield himself from the first drops. "I'm sorry," he said politely. "What was it you were saying?" "I said that one went down like a lead balloon," said the serpent. "Oh, yes," said the angel, whose name was Aziraphale. "I think it was a bit of a reaction, to be honest," said the serpent. "I mean, first offense and everything. I can't see what's so bad about knowing the difference between good and evil anyway." "It must be bad," reasoned Aziraphale in the slightly concerned tones of one who can't see a day a little bit and is worrying about it. "Otherwise you would not have been involved." "They just said get up there and make some trouble," said the serpent, whose name was Crawley. Although he was thinking of changing it now, Crawley, he decided, was not him. "Yes, but you're a demon. I'm not sure if it's actually possible for you to do good," said Aziraphale. "It's down to your basic, nature. Nothing personal, you understand." "You've got to admit it's a bit of a pantomime, though," said Crawley. "I mean, pointing out the tree and saying, 'Don't touch,' in big letters. Not very subtle, is it? I mean, why not put it on top of a high mountain or a long way off? Makes you wonder what he's really planning." "Best not to speculate, really," said Aziraphale. "You can't second-guess inevitability. I always say there's right and then there's wrong. If you do wrong, when you're told to do right, you deserve to be punished." They sat in embarrassed silence, watching the raindrops bruise the first flowers. Eventually, Crawley said, "Didn't you have a flaming sword?" Said the angel. A guilty expression passed across his face and then came back and camped there. "You did, didn't you?" said Crawley. "It flamed like anything." Well, it looked very impressive, I thought." "Yes, but, well, lost it, have you?" No, not exactly lost, more." "Well?" Aziraphale looked wretched. "If you must know," he said trifling, "I gave it away." Crawley stared up at him. "Well, I had to," said the angel, rubbing his hands distractedly. "It looks so cold, poor things, and she's expecting already, and what with the vicious animals out there and the storm coming up, I thought, well, what's the harm? So I just said, look, if you come back here, there's going to be an almighty row. But you might be needing this sword, so here it is. Don't bother to thank me. Just do everyone a big favor and don't let the sun go down on you here." He gave Crawley a worried grin. "That was the best course, wasn't it?" "I'm not sure if it's actually possible for you to do evil," said Crawley sarcastically. Aziraphale didn't notice the tone. "Oh, I do hope so," he said. "I really do hope so. It's been worrying me all afternoon." They watched the rain for a while. "Funny thing is," said Crawley, "I keep wondering whether the apple thing wasn't the right thing to do as well. A demon can get in real trouble, doing the right thing." He nudged the angel. Funny if we both got it wrong, huh? Funny if I did the good thing and you did the bad one, huh? Not really, said Aziraphale. Crawley looked at the rain. No, he said, sobering up. I suppose not. Slate black curtains tumbled over Eden. Thunder growled among the hills. The animals freshly named cowered from the storm. Far away in the dripping woods, something bright, fiery flickered among the trees. It was going to be a dark and stormy night. Sorry, I have to take a sip of tea ever so often. It's a thirsty word, isn't it? Good Omens, a narrative of certain events occurring in the last 11 years of human history, in strict accordance as shall be shewn with the nice and accurate prophecies of Agnes Nutter, compiled and edited with footnotes of an educational nature and precepts for the wise by Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett. Dramatis Personae, supernatural beings, God as God, Metatron as the voice of God, Aziraphale, an angel and part-time rare book dealer, who I personally relate to, Satan, a fallen angel, the adversary, Beelzebub, a likewise fallen angel and prince of hell, Hastur, a fallen angel and duke of hell, Liger, likewise a fallen angel and duke of hell, Crowley, an angel who did not so much fall as saunter vaguely downwards, apocalyptic horse persons, death as death, war as war, famine as famine, and pollution as pollution. I know a lot of you are like, well, what about pestilence? Well, that'll be explained later too. Humans. Thou shalt not commit adultery, Pulsifer, a witch-finder, Agnes Nutter, a prophetess, Newton Pulsifer, wages clerk and witch-finder private, Anathema device, practical occultist, and professional descendant, Shadwell, witch-finder sergeant, Madame Tracy, painted Jezebel, mornings only, Thursdays by arrangement, and a medium, Sister Mary Loquacious, a satanic nun of the Chattering Order of St. Beryl, Mr. Young, a father, Mr. Tyler, a chairman of Residents Association, and a delivery man. Them, Adam, an antichrist, Pepper, a girl, Wensley Dale, a boy, Ryan, a boy. Full chorus of Tibetans, aliens, Americans, Atlanteans, and other rare and strange creatures of the last days. And dog, satanical hellhound, and cat warrior. 11 years ago. Current theories on the creation of the universe state that if it was created at all and didn't just start, as it were, unofficially, it came into being between 10 and 20,000 million years ago. By the same token, the Earth itself is generally supposed to be about 4,500 million years old. These dates are incorrect. Medieval Jewish scholars put the date of the creation at 3,760 BC. Greek Orthodox theologians put creation as far back as 5,508 BC. These suggestions are also incorrect. Archbishop James Ussher, 1580 to 1656, published Annals Veteris et Novae Testamente in 1654, which suggested that the heaven and earth were created in 4004 BC. One of his aides took the calculation further and was able to announce triumphantly that the earth was created on Sunday, the 21st of October, 4004 BC, at exactly 9 a.m., because God liked to get work done early in the morning while he was feeling fresh. This, too, was incorrect by almost a quarter of an hour. The whole business with the fossilized dinosaur skeletons was a joke that paleontologists haven't seen yet. This proves two things. Firstly, that God moves in extremely mysterious, not to say circuitous ways. God does not play dice with the universe. He plays an ineffable game of his own devising, which might be compared from the perspective of any other players, and here's the footnote, i.e. everyone else, to being involved in an obscure and complex version of poker in a pitch-dark room with blank cards for infinite stakes, where the dealer who won't tell you the rules and who smiles all the time. Secondly, the Ursa Libra. The astrological prediction for Libra in Your Stars Today column in the Tadfield Advisor on the day this history begins reads as follows. Libra, 24 September to 23 October. You may be feeling run down and always in the same old daily round. Home and family matters are highlighted and are hanging fire. Avoid unnecessary risks. A friend is important to you. Shelve major decisions until the way ahead seems clear. You may be vulnerable to a stomach upset today, so avoid salads. Help could come from an unexpected quarter. This was perfectly correct on every count except for the bit about the salads. It wasn't a dark and stormy night. It should have been, but that's the weather for you. For every mad scientist who has had a convenient thunderstorm just on the night of his great work is finished and lying on the slab, there have been dozens who have sat around aimlessly under the peaceful stars while Igor clocks up the overtime. But don't let the fog, with rain later, temperatures dropping around 45 degrees, give anyone a false sense of security. Just because it's a mild night doesn't mean that dark forces weren't abroad. They're abroad all the time. They're everywhere. They always are. That's the whole point. Two of them lurked in the ruined graveyard. Two shadowy figures, one hunched and squat, the other lean and menacing. Both of them Olympic-grade lurkers. If Bruce Springsteen had ever recorded Born to Lurk, these two would have been on the album cover. They had been lurking in the fog for an hour now, but they had been pacing themselves and could lurk for the rest of the night, if necessary, and there was still enough sullen menace left for a final burst of lurking around dawn. Finally, after another 20 minutes, one of them said, "Booger this for a lark. He should have been here hours ago." The speaker's name was Hastur. He was a Duke of Hell. Many phenomena, wars, plagues, sudden audits, have been advanced as evidence for the hidden hand of Satan in the affairs of man. But whenever students of demonology get together, the M25 London orbital motorway is generally agreed to be among the top contenders for Exhibit A. Where they go wrong, of course, is in assuming that the wretched road is evil simply because of the incredible carnage and frustration it engenders every day. In fact, very few people on the face of the planet know that the very shape of the M25 forms the sign Odegra in the language of the black priesthood of ancient Mu, and means Hail the great beast devourer of worlds. The thousands of motors who daily fume their way around the serpentine links have the same effect as water on a prayer wheel, grinding out an endless fog of low-grade evil to pollute the metaphysical atmosphere for scores of miles around. It was one of Crowley's better achievements. It had taken years to achieve and involved 3 computer hacks, 2 break-ins, 1 minor bribery, and on one wet night when all else had failed, 2 hours of a squelchy field shifting the marker pegs a few but occultly incredibly significant meters. When Crowley had watched the first 30-mile-long tailback, he experienced the lovely warm feeling of a bad job well done. It had earned him a commendation. Crowley was currently doing 110 miles an hour, somewhere east of slow. Nothing about him looked particularly demonic, at least by classical standards. No horns, no wings. Admittedly, he was listening to a Best of Queen tape, but no conclusions should be drawn from this, because all tapes left in the car for more than a fortnight metamorphosed into the Best of Queen albums. No particularly demonic thoughts were going through his head. In fact, he was currently wondering vaguely who Moe and Chandon were. Crowley had dark hair and good cheekbones, and he was wearing snakeskin shoes, or at least presumably he was wearing shoes. And he could do really weird things with his tongue. And whenever he forgot himself, he had a tendency to hiss. He also didn't blink much. The car he was driving was a 1926 black Bentley, one owner from New, and that owner had been Crowley. He had looked after it. The reason he was late is that he was enjoying the 20th century immensely. It was much better than the 17th, and a lot better than the 14th. One of the nice things about time, Crowley had always said, was that it was steadily taking him further away from the 14th century. The most bloody, boring 100 years on God's, excuse his French, earth. The 20th century was anything but boring. In fact, a flashing blue light in his rearview mirror had been telling Crowley for the last 50 seconds that he was being followed by 2 men who would like to make it even more interesting for him. He glanced at his watch, which was designed for the kind of rich deep-sea diver who likes to know what the time is in 21 world capitals while he's down there. Here's a footnote. It was custom-made for Crowley. Getting just one chip custom-made is incredibly expensive, but he could afford it. This watch gave the time in 20 world capitals and in the capital city in another place, which it was always one time, and that was too late. The Bentley thundered up the exit ramp, took the corner on two wheels, and plunged down a leafy road. The blue light followed. Crowley sighed, took one hand from the wheel, and half turning, made a complicated gesture over his shoulder. The flashing light dimmed in the distance as the police car rolled to a halt, much to the amazement of its occupants. But it would be nothing to the amazement they experienced when they opened the hood and found out what the engine had turned into. I always wish they'd followed up on that. In the graveyard Hastur, the tall demon passed the dog-in back to Liger, the shorter one, a more accomplished lurker. I can see a light, he said. Here comes now the flash bastard. What's that he's driving, said Liger. It's a car, a horseless carriage, explained Hastur. I expect they didn't have them the last time you were here. Not for what you might call general use. They had a man at the front with a red flag, said Liger. They've come on a bit since then, I reckon. What's this Crowley like, said Liger. Hastur spat. Hay's been up here too long, he said. Right from the start. Gone native, you ask me. Drives a car with a telephone in it. Liger pondered this. Like most demons, he had a very limited grasp of technology, and so he was about to say something like, I bet it needs a lot of wire, when the Bentley rolled to a halt at the cemetery gate. And he wears sunglasses, sneered Hastur, even when he doesn't need to. He raised his voice. All hail Satan, he said. All hail Satan, Liger echoed. Hi, said Crowley, giving them a wave. Sorry I'm late, but you know how it is on the A40 at Denham. And then I tried to cut upwards at Charlie Wood. Then, now we aren't all here, said Hastur meaningfully. We must recount the deeds of the day. Yeah, deeds, said Crowley, with a slightly guilty look of one who's attending church for the first time in years and has forgotten which bits you stand up for. Hastur cleared his throat. I have tempted a priest, he said. As he walked down the street and saw the pretty girls in the sun, I put doubt in his mind. He would have been a saint, but within a decade we shall have him. Nice one, said Crowley helpfully. I have corrupted a politician, said Liger. I let him think a tiny bribe would not hurt. Within a year we shall have him. They both looked expectantly at Crowley, who gave them a big smile. You'll like this, he said. His smile became even wider and more conspiratorial. I tied up every portable telephone system in central London for 45 minutes at lunchtime, he said. There was silence, except for the distant swishing of cars. Yes, said Hastur, and then what? Look, it wasn't easy, said Crowley. That's all, said Liger. Look, people, and exactly what has this done to secure souls for our master, said Hastur. Crowley pulled himself together. What could he tell them? That 20,000 people got bloody furious? That you could hear the arteries clanging shut all across the city? And that then they went back and took it out on their secretaries or traffic wardens or whatever, and then they took it out on other people? In all kinds of vindictive little ways which, and here's the good bit, they thought up themselves. For the rest of the day, the pass-along effects were incalculable. Thousands and thousands of souls all got a little faint patina of tarnish, and you hardly had to lift a finger. But you couldn't tell that to demons like Hastur and Liger. 14th century minds, a lot of spending years picking away at one's soul. Admittedly, it was craftsmanship. But you have to think differently these days. Not big, but wide. With 5 billion people in the world, you couldn't pick the boogers off one by one anymore. You had to spread your effort. But demons like Liger and Hastur didn't understand. They'd never thought of Welsh language television, for example, or value-added tax, or Manchester. He'd been particularly pleased with Manchester. The powers that be seem to be satisfied, he said. Times are changing, so what's up? Hastur reached around behind a tombstone. This is, he said. Crowley stared at the basket. Oh, he said, no. Yes, said Hastur. Already? Yes. And it's up to me to... Yes. Hastur was showing this. Why me? Said Crowley desperately. You know me, Hastur. This isn't, a scene. Oh, yeah, it is, said Hester. You're seeing, you're starting row, take it. Times are changing. Yeah, said Liger, grinning. They're coming to an end for a start. Why me? You're obviously highly favored, said Hester maliciously. I imagine Liger would give his right arm for a chance like this. That's right, said Liger. Someone's right arm anyway, he thought. There are plenty of right arms around. No sense in wasting a good one. Hester produced a clipboard from the crubby recesses of his Mac. Sign here, he said, leaving a terrible pause between the words. Crowley fumbled vaguely in an inside pocket and produced a pen. It was sleek and matte black. It looked like though it could exceed the speed limit. It's a nice pen, said Liger. It can write underwater. Crowley muttered. Whatever would they think of next, mused Liger. Whatever it is, they better think of it quickly, said Hester. No, not A.J. Crowley. Your real name. Crowley nodded mournfully and drew a complex, wiggly sigil on the paper. It glowed redly in the gloom just for a moment, then faded. What am I supposed to do with it? He said. You will receive instructions, Hester scowled. Why so worried, Crowley? The moment we've been working for all these centuries is at hand. You're right. Yeah, right, said Crowley. He did not look now like the life figure had sprung so lightly from the Bentley a few minutes ago. He had a hunted expression. Our moment of eternal triumph awaits. Eternal. Yeah, said Crowley. And you'll be a tool of that glorious destiny. Tool. Yeah, muttered Crowley. He picked up the basket as if it might explode, which, in a manner of speaking, it would shortly do. Okay, he said, I'll be off then, shall I? Get it over with. Not that I want to get it over with. He had hurriedly aware of the things that could happen if Hester turned in an unfavorable report, but keen. The senior demons did not speak. So I'll be popping along, Crowley babbled. See you guys, see you great, fine, ciao. As the Bentley skidded off into the darkness, Liger said, What's that mean? It's Italian, said Hester. I think it means food. Funny thing to say, then, Liger said, stared at the retreating taillights. Do you trust him? He said, No, said Hester. Right, said Liger. It'd be a funny old world, he reflected, if demons went around trusting each other. Crowley, somewhere west of Aversham, hurled through the night, snatched a tape at random, and tried to wrestle it out of its brittle plastic box while staying on the road. The glare of a headlight proclaimed to be Vivaldi's Four Seasons. Soothing music, that's what he needed. He rammed it into the Blaupunkt. Oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit. Why now? Why me? He muttered, as the familiar strains of Queen washed over him. And suddenly Freddie Mercury was speaking to him. Because you've earned it, Crowley. Crowley blessed under his breath. Using electronics as a means of communication had been his idea, and Below had, for once, taken it up and, as usual, got it dead wrong. He had hoped that they could be persuaded to subscribe to Cellnet, but instead they just cut into whatever happened to be that he was listening to at the time and twisted it. Crowley gulped. Thank you very much, Lord, he said. We have great faith in you, Crowley. Thank you, Lord. This is important, Crowley. I know. This is the big one, Crowley. Leave it to me, Lord. This is what we are doing, Crowley. And if it goes wrong, then those involved will suffer greatly. Even you, Crowley, especially you. Understood, Lord. Here are your instructions, Crowley. And suddenly he knew. He hated that. They could have just easily told him. They didn't suddenly have to drop a chilly knowledge straight into his brain. He had to drive to a certain hospital. I'll be there in 5 minutes, Lord. No problem. Good. I see a little silhouette of a man. Scaramouche, Scaramouche, will you do the fandango? Crowley thumped the wheel. Everything had been going so well. He really had understood these last few centuries. That's how it goes. You think you're on top of the world, and they suddenly spring Armageddon on you. The Great War, the last battle, heaven versus hell, 3 rounds, 1 fall, no submission. And that'd be that. No more world. That's what the end of the world meant. No more world. Just endless heaven, or depending on who won, endless hell. Crowley didn't know which was worse. Well, hell was worse, of course, by definition. But Crowley remembered what heaven was like, and it had quite a few things in common with hell. You couldn't get a decent drink in either of them either for a start, and the boredom you got in heaven was almost as bad as the excitement you got in hell. But there was no getting out of it. You couldn't be a demon and have free will. Well, at least it wouldn't be this year. He'd have time to do things, unload long-term stocks for a start. He wondered what would happen if he just stopped the car here on this dark and damp and empty road, took the basket, swung it around and around, let go, and something dreadful, that's what. He had been an angel once. He hadn't meant to fall. He just hung out with the wrong people. The Bentley plunged on through the darkness, its fuel gauge pointing to zero. It had pointed to zero for more than 60 years now. It wasn't all bad being a demon. You didn't have to pay for petrol, for one thing. The only time Crowley had bought petrol was once since 1967, went to get the free James Bond bullet hole in the windscreen transfers, which he rather fancied at the time. On the back seat, the thing in the basket began to cry, the air raid siren wail of the newly born. High, wordless, and old. Just a little footnote. This is written by people who are of UK descent, so you're going to hear words like petrol. And there's actually a word in here I can't use because, well, technically in America, it's not a happy word. Even though it is quite funny to use it. 1 second. I'm having to make some corrections. Okay. It was quite a nice hospital, thought Mr. Young. It would have been quiet, too, if it wasn't for the nuns. He quite liked nuns, not that he was, left-footer or anything like that. No, when it came to avoiding going to church, the church he stolidly avoided going to was St. Cecil and All Angels, no nonsense C of E. And he wouldn't have dreamed of avoiding going to any other. All the others had the wrong smell. Floor polish for the low, somewhat suspicious incense for the high. Deep in the leather armchair of his soul, Mr. Young knew that God got embarrassed by that sort of thing. But he liked seeing nuns around in the same way like he liked seeing the Salvation Army. It made you feel like it was all right, that people somewhere were keeping the world on its axis. This was his first experience with the Chattering Order of St. Beryl, however. And here's a very long footnote, so I'm going to read this. St. Beryl Articulatus of Cacao, reputed to be martyred in the middle of the 5th century, according to legend. Beryl was a young woman who was betrothed against her will to a pagan, Prince Casimir. On the night she prayed to the Lord to intercede, vaguely expecting a miraculous beard to appear, and she had in fact already laid in a small ivory-handled razor suitable for ladies against this very eventuality. Instead, the Lord granted Beryl the miraculous ability to chatter continually about whatever was on her mind, however inconsequential, without pause for breath or food. According to one version of the legend, Beryl was strangled by Prince Casimir 3 weeks after the wedding, with their marriage still unconsummated. She died a virgin and a martyr, chattering to the end. According to another version of the legend, Casimir bought himself a set of earplugs and she died in bed with him at the age of 62. The Chattering Order of St. Beryl is under a vow to emulate St. Beryl in all times except on Tuesday afternoons for half an hour when the nuns are permitted to shut up and, if they wish, play table tennis. That was a very long anecdote there. Deidre had run across them while being involved in one of her causes, possibly the one involving lots of unpleasant South Americans fighting other unpleasant South Americans and priests egging them on instead of getting on with their properly priestly concerns, like organizing the church cleaning rota. Order of the Yappers, yes. The point was nuns should be quiet. They were the right shape for it, like those pointy things you got in those chambers. Mr. Young was vaguely where your hi-fi got tested in. They shouldn't be, chattering all the time. He filled his pipe with tobacco. Well, they called it tobacco. It wasn't what he thought it was tobacco. It wasn't the tobacco you used to get, and wondered reflectively what would happen if you asked a nun where the gents was. Probably the Pope sent you a sharp note or something. He shifted his position awkwardly and glanced at his watch. One thing, though, at least the nuns had put their foot down about him being present at the birth. Deidre had been all for it. She'd been reading things again. One kid already, and suddenly she's declaring that this confinement was going to be the most joyous and sharing experience two human beings could have. That's what came of letting her order her own newspapers. Mr. Young distrusted papers whose inner pages had names like lifestyle or options. I'm gonna give my own opinion on this in here in a minute. Well, he hadn't got anything against Joy. He hadn't got anything against joyous sharing experiences. Joyous sharing experiences were fine by him. The world probably need more joyous sharing experiences, but he had made it abundantly clear that this was one joyous sharing experience Deidre could have by herself. You have to remember. Okay, for one thing, I'm gonna give y'all a heads up here. This book was written originally in 1990 to kind of give you an idea of things. So you have to take into consideration that Mr. Young is probably the generation before our generation. So, you have to think it in terms like that. And the nuns had agreed they saw no reason for the father to be involved in the proceedings. When you thought about it, Mr. Young mused, they probably saw no reason why the father should be involved anywhere. He finished thumbing the so-called tobacco into the pipe and glared at the little sign on the wall of the waiting room that said, for his own comfort, he would not smoke. For his own comfort, he decided he'd go and stand in the porch. If there was a discreet shrubbery for his own comfort out there, so much the better. He wandered down the empty corridors and found a doorway that led out to a rain-swept courtyard full of righteous dustbins. He shivered and cupped his hands to light his pipe. It happened to them at a certain age, wives. 25 blameless years, and then suddenly they were going off and doing these robotic exercises in pink socks with the feet cut out, and they start blaming you for never having had work for a living. It was hormones or something. A large black car skidded to a halt by the dustbins. A young man in dark glasses leaped out into the drizzle, holding what looked like a carrot cot, and stalked toward the entrance. Mr. Young took his pipe out of his mouth. "You've left your lights on," he said helpfully. The man gave him the blank look of someone whose lights were the least of his worries and waved his hand vaguely toward the Bentley. The lights went out. "That's handy," said Mr. Young. "Infrared, is it?" He was mildly surprised to see that the man did not appear to be wet, and that the carrot cot appeared to be occupied. "Has it started yet?" said the man. Mr. Young felt vaguely proud to be so instantly recognizable as a parent. "Yes," he said. "They made me go out," he added thankfully. "Already? Any idea how long we've got?" Mr. Young noted, obviously a doctorly views about co-parenting. "I think we were getting on with it," said Mr. Young. "What room is she in?" the man said hurriedly. "We're in room 3, said Mr. Young. He patted his pockets and found the battered packet which, in accord with tradition, he had brought with him. "Would we care to share a joyous cigar experience?" he said. But the man had gone. Mr. Young carefully replaced the packet and looked reflectively at his pipe. Always in a rush, these doctors, working all the hours God sent. There's a trick they do with 1 pea and 3 cups which is very hard to follow, and something like it, for greater stakes than a handful of loose change, is about to take place. The text will be slowed down to allow the sleight of hand to be followed. Mrs. Deidre Young is giving birth in delivery room 3. She is having a golden hair male baby we will call baby A. The wife of the American Cultural Attaché, Mrs. Harriet Dowling, is giving birth in delivery room 4. She is having a golden-haired male baby we will call baby B. Sister Mary Loquacious has been a devout Satanist since birth. She went to Sabbath school as a child and won black stars for handwriting and liver. Yes, that's exactly what it says. When she was told to join the Chattering Order, she went obediently, having a natural talent in that direction in any case, knowing that she would be among friends. She would be quite bright if she was ever put in a position to find out, but long ago she found out that being a scatterbrain, as she put it, gave you easier journey through life. Currently, she is being handled. I'm gonna clear my throat for this one. Currently, she is being handed a golden-haired male baby we will call the adversary, destroyer kings, angel of the bottomless pit, great beast that is called dragon, prince of this world, father of lies, spawn of Satan, and lord of darkness. And yes, they say this every time. Watch carefully, round and round they go. "Is that him?" said Sister Mary, staring at the baby. "Only I expected funny eyes, red or green, or teensy-weensy little hoofykins, or a widow tail." She turned him around as she spoke. No horns either. The devil's child looked ominously normal. "Yes, that's him," said Crowley. "Fancy me holding the Antichrist," said Sister Mary, "and bathing the Antichrist and counting his little toesy-woesies." She was now addressing the child directly, lost in some world of her own. Crowley waved a hand in front of her, wimpled, "Hello, hello, Sister Mary." Oh, sorry, sir. He's a little sweetheart, though. Does he look like his daddy? I bet he does. Does he look like his daddy, Redigans? No, said Crowley firmly. And now I should get up to the liver rooms if I were you. Will he remember me when he grows up, do you think? Said Sister Mary wistfully, sidling slowly down the corridor. Pray that he doesn't, said Crowley, and fled. Sister Mary headed through the nighttime hospital with the adversary, destroyer of kings, angel of the bottomless pit, great beast that is called dragon, prince of this world, father of lies, spawn of Satan, and lord of darkness safely in her arms. She found a bassinet and laid him down in it. He gurgled. She gave him a tickle. A matronly head appeared around the door. It said, Sister Mary, what are you doing here? Shouldn't you be on duty in room 4? Master Crowley said, just glide along. There's a good nun. Have you seen the husband anywhere? He's not in the waiting room. I've only seen Master Crowley, and he told me. I'm sure he did, said Sister Grace Voluble firmly. I suppose I'd better go look for that wretched man. Come in and keep an eye on her, will you? She's a bit woozy, but the baby is fine. Sister Grace paused. Why are you winking? Is there something wrong with your eye? You know, Sister Mary hissed archly. The baby's the exchange. Of course, in good time, but we can't have the father wandering round, can we, Sister Grace? Said Sister Grace. No telling what he might see, so just wait here and mind the baby. There's a dear. We do have an ad break in about 5 minutes. I will pause the reading while we have said ad break, so you will not miss anything. She sailed off down the polished corridor. Sister Mary, wheeling her bassinet, entered the delivery room. Mrs. Young was more than woozy. She was fast asleep, with a look of determined self-satisfaction of someone who knows that other people are going to have to do the running around for once. Baby A was asleep beside her, weighed a name tag. Sister Mary, who had been brought up to be helpful, removed the name tag, copied it out, and attached the duplicate to the baby in her care. The babies looked similar, both being small, blotchy, and looking sort of, although not really, like Winston Churchill. Now, thought Sister Mary, I will do with a nice cup of tea. Most of the members of the convent were old-fashioned Satanists, like their parents and grandparents before them. They had been brought up to it and weren't, when you got right down to it, particularly evil. Human beings mostly aren't. They're just carried away by new ideas, dressing up in jackboots and shooting people, or dressing up in white sheets and lynching people, or dressing up in tie-dye jeans and playing guitars at people. Offer people a new creed with a costume and their hearts and minds will follow. Anyway, being brought up as a Satanist tended to take the edge off of it. It was something you did on Saturday nights, and the rest of the time you simply got on with life as best you could, just like everyone else. Besides, Sister Mary was a nurse, and nurses, whatever their creed, are primarily nurses, which had a lot to do with the wearing your watch upside down, keeping calm in emergencies, and dying for a cup of tea. She hoped someone would come soon. She's done the important bit, now she wanted her tea. It may help to understand human affairs to be clear that most of the great triumphs and tragedies of history are caused not by people being fundamentally good or fundamentally bad, but by people being fundamentally people. There was a knock at the door. She opened it. Has it happened yet? Asked Mr. Young. I'm the father, the husband, whatever, both. Sister Mary had expected the American cultural attaché to look like Blake Carrington or J.R. Ewing. Mr. Young didn't look like any American she'd ever seen on television, except possibly for the avuncular sheriff in the better class of murder mystery. Here's a footnote. With a little old lady as the sleuth, and no car chases unless they're done very slowly. That was a little. For those of you that might not know that reference, it's a stab at Mercy Road. He was something of a disappointment. She didn't think much of his cardigan either. She swallowed her disappointment. Oh yes, she said. Congratulations, your lady wife's asleep, poor pet. Mr. Young looked over his shoulder. Twins, he said. He reached for his pipe. He stopped reaching for his pipe. He reached for it again. Twins? No one said anything about twins. Oh no, said Sister Mary hurriedly. This one's yours. The other ones are someone else's. Just looking after him until Sister Grace gets back. No, she reiterated, pointing at the adversary, destroyer kings, angel of the bottomless pit, great beast that is called dragon, prince of this world, father of lies, spawn of Satan, and lord of darkness. This one's definitely yours, from the top of his head to the tip of his hoopy-whoopies, which he hasn't got, she added hastily. Mr. Young peered down. Ah, yes, he said doubtfully. He looks like my side of the family. All are present and correct. Is he? Oh, yes, said Sister Mary. He's a very normal child, she added. Very, very normal. There was a pause. They stared at the sleeping baby. You don't have much of an accent, said Sister Mary. Have you been here long? Oh, about 10 years, said Mr. Young, mildly puzzled. The job moved, you see, and I had to move with it. It must be a very exciting job, I've always thought, said Sister Mary. Mr. Young looked gratified. Not everyone appreciated the more stimulating aspects of cost accountancy. I expect it was very different from where you were before, Sister Mary went on. I suppose so, said Mr. Young, who never really thought about it. Luton, as far as he could remember, was pretty much like Tadfield. Yes, I actually know how to pronounce that. Thank you, Monty Python. The same sort of hedges between your house and the railway station, the same sort of people. Taller buildings, for one thing, said Sister Mary desperately. Mr. Young stared at her. The only one he could think of was the Alliance and Leicester offices. And I expect you go to a lot of garden parties, said the nun. Ah, he was on firmer ground here. Deirdre was very keen on that sort of thing. Lots, he said with feeling. Deirdre makes jam for them, you know, and I normally have to help with the White Elephant. This was an aspect of Buckingham Palace society that had never occurred to Sister Mary, although pachyderm fitted right in. She apparently didn't know what a white elephant was. This, I expect they're the tribute, she said. I've read where these foreign potentates give her all sorts of things. I'm sorry? I'm a big fan of the royal family, you know. Oh, so am I, said Mr. Young, leaping gratefully onto this new ice floe in the bewildering stream of consciousness. Yes, you knew where you were with the royals, the proper ones, of course, who pulled their weight in the hand-waving in the bridge-opening department, not the ones who went to discos all night long were sick all over the paparazzi. And here's a footnote. It is possibly worth mentioning at this point that Mr. Young thought the paparazzi was some kind of Italian linoleum. Sorry. That's nice, said Sister Mary. I thought you people weren't too keen on them, what with the revoluting and throwing all those tea sets into the river. She chattered on, encouraged by the order's instruction that members should always try to say what was on their minds. Mr. Young was out of his depth and too tired now to worry about it very much. The religious life probably made people a little odd. He wished Mrs. Young would wake up, and one of the words in Sister Mary's wittering struck up a hopeful chord in his mind. Would there be any possibility of me being able to have a cup of tea, perhaps? He ventured. Oh, my, said Sister Mary, her hand flying to her mouth. Whatever am I thinking of? Mr. Young made a comment. I'll see to it right away, she said. Are you sure you don't want coffee, though? There's one of those bendable machines on the next floor. Let me pause there. There is an ad break for about a minute and a half. I do apologize for that. Sadly, it is a necessary evil. I hope y'all are enjoying the content, though, so far. I've been reading for almost an hour now, which surprises me. I may not make this the entire stream, though, because I'm already noticing that, A, I have really shitty lighting right now, and I need to get up and change that fact. And B, it's going to be taxing on my voice if I continue to do this for longer than maybe another hour or so. I did not realize how long this would take. I may have to start getting lemon water for these days, but if I do swap out to gaming here in a bit, I will, just like the art streams, this is going to be a stream of its own, and I will be doing some cozy gaming, probably some Dreamlight Valley, and have an open PC for folks to respond and or speak. Honey candies I hate honey candies, though. That's the problem. I'd have to have a menthol cough drop or something at best, if not just lemon water. Lemon water is really good for you too, actually. So, and the ad break is ended. I will take up where I left off. Give me one moment. Tea, please, said Mr. Young. My word, you really have gone native, haven't you? Said Sister Mary gaily as she bustled out. Now, if you haven't figured out by now, Mr. Young is actually British. That shows you how much they've grouped up here. Mr. Young, left alone with one sleeping wife and two sleeping babies, sagged onto a chair. Yes, it must be all that getting up early and kneeling and so on. Good people, of course, but not entirely compost mentis. He had seen a Ken Russell film once, and there had been nuns in it. There didn't seem to be any of that sort of thing going on, but no smoke without fire and so on. He sighed. It was then that baby A awoke and settled down to a really good wail. Mr. Young hadn't had to quiet a screaming baby for years. He had never been much good at it to start with. He'd always expected Sir Winston Churchill and patting. He'd always respected Sir Winston Churchill, and patting small versions of him on the bottom always seemed ungracious. Welcome to the world, he said wearily. You get used to it after a while. The baby shut its mouth and glared at him as if he were a recalcitrant general. Sister Mary chose that moment to come in with the tea. Satanist or not, she had also found a plate and arranged some ice biscuits on it. They were the sort you only ever get in the bottom of certain tea time assortments, and Mr. Young's was the same pink as the surgical appliance and had a snowman picked out on it in white icing. I don't expect you normally have these, she said. They're what you call cookies. We call them biscuits. Mr. Young had just opened his mouth to explain that yes, so did he, and so did people even in Luton, when another nun rushed in breathless. She looked at Sister Mary, realized that Mr. Young had never seen the inside of a pentagram, and confined herself to pointing at Baby A and winking. Sister Mary nodded and winked back. The nun wheeled the baby out. As methods of human communication go, a wink is quite versatile. You can say a lot with a wink. For example, the new nun's wink said, "Where the hell have you been? Baby B has been born. We're ready to make the switch, and here you are in the wrong room with the adversary, destroyer kings, angel of the bottomless pit, great beast that is called dragon, prince of this world, father lies, spawn of Satan, and lord of darkness, drinking tea. Do you realize I've nearly been shot?" As far as she was concerned, Sister Mary's answering wink meant, "Here's the adversary, destroyer kings, angel of the bottomless pit, great beast that is called dragon, prince of this world, father lies, spawn of Satan, and lord of darkness. And I can't talk now because there's this outsider here." Whereas Sister Mary, on the other hand, had thought that the orderly's wink was more of the lines of, "Well done, Sister Mary, switch the babies all by yourself, now indicate to me the superfluous child, and I shall remove it, and let you get on with your tea with this royal excellency, the American culture." I'm reading it just as it's written. And therefore her own wink meant, "There you go, dearie, that's Baby B. Now take him away and leave him to chat with His Excellency. I've always wanted to ask him why they have those tall buildings with all the mirrors on them." The subtleties of all this were quite lost on Mr. Young, who was extremely embarrassed at all this clandestine affection, was thinking, that Mr. Russell, he knew what he was talking about, no mistake. If you're ever curious as to what the movie he's referring to is, just Google it. Trust me, it's not your mama's nun movie. Sister Mary, because I actually Googled it out of curiosity when I first read this book. So, Sister Mary's error might have been noticed by the other nun had she not herself been severely rattled by the Secret Service men in Mrs. Dowling's room, who kept looking at her with growing unease. This was because they had been trained to react a certain way to people in long flowing robes and long flowing headdresses, and were currently suffering from a conflict of signals. Humans suffering from a conflict of signals aren't the best people to be holding guns, especially when they've just witnessed a natural childbirth, which definitely looked as un-American, an un-American way of bringing new citizens into the world. Also, they heard that there were missiles in the building. MISSALS, not the other kind. Mrs. Young stirred. "Have you picked a name for him yet?" said Sister Mary archly. Said Mr. Young. I don't know, not really. If it was a girl, it would have been Lucinda after my mother, or Germaine. That was Deirdre's choice. "Wormwood's a nice name," said the nun, remembering classics. "Or Damien. Damien's very popular." Anathema Device, her mother, was not a great student of religious matters. Happened to read the word one day and thought it was a lovely name for a girl who was 8.5 years old, and she was reading the book under the bedclothes with a torch. Other children learned to read on basic primers with colored pictures of apples, balls, cockroaches, and so forth. Not the Device family. Anathema had learned to read from the book. It didn't have any apples or balls in it. I keep saying the word balls, it's funny. I don't know. It did have a rather good 18th century woodcut of Agnes Nutter being burnt at the stake and looking rather cheerful about it. We'll find out about that later. The first word she could recognize was nice. Very few people at the age of 8.5 know that nice also means scrupulously exact. But anathema was one of them. The second word was accurate. The first sentence she had ever read out loud was, okay, now I apologize if I brutalize the Middle English, but here goes. "I tell ye this, and I charge ye with my words. 4 shall ride, and 4 shall also ride. 3 and 3 shall ride in the sky as twixt, and 1 shall ride in flames, and there shall be no stopping them, nor fish, nor rain, nor road, neither devil nor angel, and she shall be there also." Anathema. Anathema liked to read about herself. There were books which caring parents who read their right Sunday papers could purchase with their children's names printed as the heroine or hero. This was meant to interest the child in the book. In Anathema's case, it wasn't only her in the book, and it had been spot on so far, but her parents and her grandparents and everyone back to the 17th century. She was too young and too self-centered at this point to attach any importance to the fact that there was no mention made of her children, or indeed any events in her future further away than 11 years' time. And of course, if you believe the book, it would be. Oh, I'm sorry. I skipped ahead. I apologize. When you're 8.5, 11 years is a lifetime, and of course, if you believe the book, it would be. She was a bright child with a pale face and black eyes and hairs, rules she tended to make people feel uncomfortable, a family trait she inherited along with being more psychic than was good for her from her great-great-great-great-great-great-grandmother. She was precocious and self-possessed. The only thing that about anathema her teachers had ever had the nerve to upbraid for her was for her spelling, which was not so much appalling as 300 years too late. Basically, she wrote in Middle English. The nuns took baby A and swapped it for baby B under the noses of the attaché's wife and Secret Service man by the cunning expedient of wheeling one baby away to be weighed. Love, got to do that, it's the law, and wheeling another baby back a little later. The cultural attaché himself, Thaddeus J. Dowling, had been called back to Washington in a hurry a few days earlier, but had been on the phone to Mrs. Dowling throughout the birth experience to helping her with her breathing. It didn't help that he had been talking on the other line to his investment counselor. At one point, he had been forced to put her on hold for 20 minutes. Really? But that was okay. No, it's not. Having a baby is the single most joyous co-experience that two human beings can share, and he wasn't going to miss a second of it. He'd got one of the Secret Service men to videotape it for him. Now you know why they're scarred for life. Evil in general does not sleep, and therefore doesn't see why anyone else should. But Crowley liked sleep. It was one of the pleasures in the world. Especially after a heavy meal. He had slept right through most of the 19th century, for example, not because he needed to, simply because he enjoyed it. Here's a footnote. Although he did have to get up in 1832 to go to the lavatory. One of the pleasures of the world. Well, he'd better start really enjoying them now while there was still time. The Bentley roared through the night, heading east. Of course, he was all in favor of Armageddon in general terms. If anyone had asked him why he had been spending centuries tinkering in the affairs of mankind, he'd have said, oh, in order to bring about Armageddon and the triumph of hell. But it was one thing to work to bring it about. It was quite another for it to actually happen. Crowley had always known he would be around when the world ended because he was immortal and wouldn't have any alternative. But he'd hoped it would be a long way off. Because he rather liked people. It was a major failing in a demon. Oh, he did his best to make their short lives miserable because that was his job, but nothing he could think up was half as bad as the stuff they thought up themselves. They seemed to have a talent for it. It was built into their design somehow. They were born into a world that was against them in 1,000 little ways and then devoted most of their energies to making it worse. Over the years, Crowley had found it increasingly difficult to find anything demonic to do, which showed up against the natural background of generalized nastiness. There had been times over the past millennium when he felt like sending a message back below saying, look, we might as well just give up right now. We might as well shut down Dis and Pandemonium and everywhere and move up here. There's nothing we can do to them that they don't do to themselves. And they do things we've never even thought of, often involving electrodes. They've got what we lack. They've got imagination and electricity, of course. One of them had written, hadn't he? Hell is empty and all the devils are here. Crowley had gotten a commendation for the Spanish Inquisition. He had been in Spain then, mainly hanging around cantinas in the nicer parts, and hadn't even known about it till the commendation arrived. He'd gone to have a look and come back and got drunk for a week. That Hieronymus Bosch. What a weirdo. And just when you think that they were more malignant than ever hell could be, they could occasionally show more grace than heaven ever dreamed of. Often the same individual was involved in it. It was this free will thing, of course. It was a bugger. Aziraphale had tried to explain it to him once. The whole point, he had said, this was somewhere around 1020, when they had first reached their little arrangement. The whole point was that when the human was good or bad, it was because they wanted to be. Whereas people like Crowley, and of course himself, were set in their ways right from the start. People couldn't become truly holy, he said, unless they had also had the opportunity to be definitively wicked. Crowley had thought about this for some time, and around 1023 he said, "Hang on. That only works right if you start everyone off equal, okay? You can't start someone off in a muddy shack in the middle of a war zone and expect them to do as well as someone born in a castle." Profound thought here. "Ah," Aziraphale had said, "that's the good bit. The lower you start, the more opportunities you have." Crowley had said, "That's lunatic." "No," said Aziraphale, "that's ineffable." Aziraphale, the enemy, of course, but an enemy for 6,000 years now, which made him sort of a friend. Crowley reached out and picked up the car phone. Being a demon, of course, was supposed to mean you had no free will, but you couldn't hang around humans for very long without learning a thing or two. Mr. Young had not been too keen on Damien or Wormwood or any of Sister Mary Loquacious's other suggestions, which had covered half of hell and most of the golden years of Hollywood. "Well," she finally said, a little hurt, "I don't think there's anything wrong with Errol or Carrie. Very nice American names, both of them." "I'd fancied something more traditional," explained Mr. Young. "We've always gone in for good, simple names in our family." Sister Mary beamed. "That's right. The old names are always the best, if you ask me. A decent English name, like people had in the Bible." I just have to pause for a second there. I'm like, I'm sorry, what? "Given the fact they were English," said Mr. Young. "Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John," he said speculatively. Sister Mary winced. "Only they were never struck me as very good Bible names, really," Mr. Young added. "They sound more like cowboys and footballers." "Saul's nice," said Sister Mary, making the best of it. "I don't want something too old-fashioned," said Mr. Young. "Or Cain. Very modern. Cain, really," Sister Mary said. Mr. Young looked doubtful. "Or there's always Adam," said Sister Mary. "That should be safe enough," she thought. "Adam," said Mr. Young. It would be nice to think that the Satanist nuns had the surplus baby B, discreetly adopted, that he grew to be a normal, happy, laughing child, active and exuberant, and after that he grew further to become a normal, fairly contented adult. And perhaps that's what happened. Let your mind dwell on his junior school prize for spelling, his unremarkable, although quite pleasant time at university, his job in the payroll department of the Tadfield and Norton Building Society, his lovely wife, possibly you could like to imagine some children, and a hobby, restoring vintage motorcycles perhaps, or breeding tropical fish. You don't want to know what could have happened to Baby B. We like your version better anyway. He probably wins prizes for his tropical fish. In a small house in Dorking, Surrey, a light was on in a bedroom window. Newton Pulsifer was 12 and thin and bespectacled, and he should have been in bed hours ago. His mother, though, was convinced of her child's genius and let him stay at past his bedtime to do his experiments. His current experiment was changing a plug on an ancient Bakelite radio his mother had given him to play with. He sat at what he proudly called his worktop, a battered old table covered in curls of wire, batteries, little light bulbs, and a homemade crystal set that never worked. He hadn't managed to get the Bakelite radio working yet either, but then again, he never seemed able to get that far. 3 slightly crooked model airplanes hung on cotton cords from his bedroom ceiling. Even a casual observer could have seen that they were made by someone who was both painstaking and very careful, but also no good at making model airplanes. He was hopelessly proud of all of them, even the Spitfire, where he had made a rather mess of the wings. He pushed his glasses back at the bridge of his nose, squinted down at the plug, and put down the screwdriver. He had had hopes for this time. He had followed all the instructions on plug changing on page 5 of the boy's own book of practical electronics, including 101 safe and educational things to do with electricity. He had added the correct color-coded wires to the correct pins. He had checked all that was the right amperage. He had checked that it was the right amperage fuse. He had screwed it all back together, and so far, no problems. He plugged it in the socket, and then he switched the socket on. Every light in the house went out. Newton beamed with pride. He was getting better. Last time he had done it, he blacked out the whole of Dorking. And the man from the electric had to come over and have a word with his mum. He had a burning and totally unrequited passion for things electrical. He had a computer at school, and half a dozen studious children stayed on after school doing things with punch cards. When the teacher in charge of the computer had finally exceeded Newton's pleas to be allowed to join them, Newton had only ever got to feed one little card into the machine. It had chewed it up and choked fatally on it. Newton was certain that the future was in computers, which he was right in that. I added that a little bit. When the future arrived, he'd be ready in the forefront of new technology. The future had its own ideas on this. It was all in the book. Adam, thought Mr. Young. He tried saying to see how it sounded. Adam. He stared down at the golden curls of the adversary, destroyer kings, angel of the bottomless pit, great beast that is called dragon, prince of this world, father of lies, spawn of Satan, and lord of darkness. You know, he concluded after a while, I think he actually looks like an Adam. It had not been a dark and stormy night. The dark and stormy night occurred 2 days later, about 4 hours after both Mrs. Dowling and Mrs. Young and their respective babies had left the building. It was a particularly dark and stormy night, and just after the midnight, as the storm reached its height, a bolt of lightning struck the convent of the Chattering Order, setting fire to the roof of the vestry. No one was badly hurt by the fire, but it went on for some hours, doing a fair amount of damage in the process. The instigator of the fire lurked on a nearby hilltop and watched the blaze. He was tall, thin, and a Duke of Hell. It was the last thing that needed to be done before his return to the nether regions, and he had done it. He could safely leave the rest of Crowley. Hastur went home. Technically, Aziraphale was a principality, but people made jokes about that these days. On the whole, neither he nor Crowley would have chosen each other's company, but they were both men, or at least men-shaped creatures in the world, and the arrangement had worked to their advantage all this time. Besides, you grew accustomed to the only other face that had been around more or less consistently for 6 millennia. Sounds like me with computers. Yeah, I know. The arrangement was very simple, so simple, in fact, that it didn't really deserve the capital letter, which it had got for simply being in existence for so long. It was a sort of sensible arrangement that many isolated agents working in awkward conditions a long way from their superiors reached for their opposite number when they realized they had more in common with their immediate opponents than their remote allies. It meant a tacit non-interference in certain of each other's activities. It made certain that while neither really won, also neither really lost. And both were able to demonstrate to their masters the great strides they were making against a cunning and well-informed adversary. It meant that Crowley had been allowed to develop Manchester, while Aziraphale had taken a free hand in the whole of Shropshire. Crowley took Glasgow. Aziraphale had Edinburgh. Neither claimed any responsibility for Milton Keynes. Here's a footnote to that. Note for Americans and other aliens, Milton Keynes is a new city approximately halfway between London and Birmingham. It was built to be modern, efficient, healthy, and all in all a pleasant place to live. Many Britons find this amusing. But both reported it as a success. And then, of course, it seemed even natural that they should, as it were, hold the fort for one another when common sense was dictated. Both were of angel stock, after all. If one was going to hell for a quick temptation, it made sense to nip across the city and carry out a standard brief moment of divine ecstasy. It'd get done anyway, and being sensible about it gave everyone more free time and cut down on expenses. Aziraphale felt the occasional pang of guilt about this, but centuries of association with humanity was having the same effect on him as it was on Crowley, except in the other direction. Besides, the authorities didn't seem to care much who did anything as long as it got done. Currently, what Aziraphale was doing was standing with Crowley by the duck pond in St. James Park. They were feeding the ducks. The ducks in St. James Park were so used to being fed by secret agents meeting clandestinely that they have developed their own Pavlovian reaction. Put a St. James Park duck in a laboratory cage and show it a picture of two men, one usually wearing a coat with a fur collar, the other something somber with a scarf, and it looked up expectantly. The Russian cultural attaché's black bread is particularly sought after by the more discerning duck, while the head of M19's soggy havas with marmite is relished by the connoisseurs. Aziraphale tossed a crust to a scruffy-looking drake, who was caught and sank immediately. The angel turned to Crowley. "Really, my dear?" he murmured. "Sorry," said Crowley. "I was forgetting myself." The duck bobbed angrily to the surface. "Of course we knew something was going on," Aziraphale said, "but one somehow imagines this sort of thing happening in America. They go in for that sort of thing over there." "It might yet do at that," said Crowley gloomily. He gazed thoughtfully across the park to the Bentley, the back wheel of which was being industriously clamped. "Oh, yes, the American diplomats," said the angel. "Rather showy, one feels, as if Armageddon was some sort of cinematographic show that you would wish to sell in as many countries as possible." "Every country," said Crowley, "the earth and all the kingdoms thereof." Aziraphale tossed the last scrap of bread at the ducks, who went off to pester the Bulgarian naval attaché and a furtive-looking man in a Cambridge tie, and carefully disposed of the paper bag in a waste paper bin. He turned and faced Crowley. "We'll win, of course," he said. "You don't want that," said the demon. "Why not, pray?" "Listen," said Crowley desperately. "How many musicians do you think your side have got? First grade, I mean." Aziraphale looked taken aback. "Well, I should think," he began. "Two," said Crowley. "Elgar and Liszt, that's all. We've got the rest. Beethoven, Brahms, all the blocks. Mozart, the lot. Can you imagine eternity with Elgar?" Aziraphale shut his eyes. "All too easily," he groaned. "That's it, then," said Crowley with a gleam of triumph. He knew Aziraphale's weak spot all right. "No more compact discs, no more Albert Hall, no more proms, no more Glenborg, just celestial harmonies all day long." "Ineffable," Aziraphale murmured. "Like eggs without salt, you said, which reminds me, no salt, no eggs. No Gravlax with dill sauce, no fascinating little restaurants where they know you, no Daily Telegraph crossword, no small antique shops, no bookshops either. No interesting old editions, no." Crowley scraped the bottom of Aziraphale's barrel of interest. "Regency silver snuff boxes." "But after we win, life will be better," croaked the angel. "But it won't be as interesting. Look, you know I'm right. You'd be as happy with a harp as I would be with a pitchfork." "You know we don't play harps, and we don't use pitchforks. I was being rhetorical." They stared at one another. Aziraphale spread his elegantly manicured hands. "My people are more than happy for it to happen, you know. It's what it's all about, you see. The great final test, flaming swords, the horseman seas of blood, the whole tedious business," he shrugged. "And then game over, insert coin," said Crowley. "Sometimes I find your methods of expression a little difficult to follow." "I like the seas as they are. It doesn't have to happen. You don't have to test everything to destruction just to see if you made it right." Aziraphale shrugged again. That's ineffable wisdom for you, I'm afraid." The angel shuddered and pulled his coat around him. Gray clouds were piling above the city. "Let's go somewhere warm," he said. "You're asking me?" said Crowley glumly. They walked in somber silence for a while. "It's not that I disagree with you," said the angel, as they plodded across the grass. "It's just that I'm not allowed to disobey. You know that." "Me too," said Crowley. Aziraphale gave him a sidelong glance. "Oh, come now," he said. "You're a demon, after all." "Yeah, but my people are only in favor of disobedience in general terms. It's specific disobedience they come down on heavily." "Such as disobedience to themselves?" "You've got it. You'd be amazed. Or perhaps you wouldn't be. How long do you think we've got?" Crowley waved a hand at the Bentley, which unlocked its doors. "The prophecies differ," said Aziraphale, sliding to the passenger seat, "certainly until the end of the century, although we may expect certain phenomena before then. Most of the prophets for the past millennium were more concerned in scansion than accuracy." Crowley pointed to the ignition key. It turned. "What?" he said. "You know," said the angel helpfully, "and the world unto an end shall come in Tumty 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 1 or 2 or 3 or whatever. There aren't many good rhymes for 6, so it's probably a good year to be in." "And what sort of phenomena?" "Two-headed calves, signs in the sky, geese flying backwards, showers of fish, that sort of thing. The presence of the Antichrist affects the natural operation of causality." Crowley put the Bentley in gear, then he remembered something. He snapped his fingers. The wheel clamps disappeared. "Let's have lunch," he said. "I owe you one from, when was it?" "Paris, 1793, said Aziraphale. "Oh, yes, the Reign of Terror. Was that one of yours or one of ours?" "Wasn't it yours?" "Can't recall, but it was quite a good restaurant, though." As they drove past an astonished traffic warden, his notebook spontaneously combusted to Crowley's amazement. "I'm pretty certain I didn't mean to do that," he said. Aziraphale blushed. "That was me," he said. "I always thought that your people invented them." "Did you? We thought they were yours." Crowley stared at the smoke in the rearview mirror. "Come on," he said. "Let's do the Ritz." Crowley had not bothered to book. In his world, table reservations were things that happened to other people. This is going to be the fun part. I'm just curious how much more. Oh my goodness. There's a good chunk for this. I may end up having to split this because I am starting to lose my voice a little bit. I wasn't really prepared for this as much as I thought it was. Aziraphale collected books. If he were totally honest with himself, he would have admitted that his bookshop was simply somewhere to store them. That sounds about like me running a bookstore. He was not unusual in this. In order to maintain his cover as a typical second-hand bookseller, he used every means short of actual physical violence to prevent customers from making a purchase. Unpleasant damp smells, glowering looks, erratic opening hours. He was incredibly good at it. He had been collecting for a long time, and like all collectors, he specialized. He had more than 60 books of predictions concerning developments in the last handful of centuries of the second millennium. He had a penchant for wild first editions, and he had a complete set of infamous Bibles, individually named for errors in typesetting. These Bibles included the Unrighteous Bible, so called from the printer's error which caused it to proclaim in 1 Corinthians, "Know ye not that the unrighteous shall inherit the kingdom of God?" And the Wicked Bible, printed by Barker and Lucas in 1632, in which the word "not" was omitted from the seventh commandment, making it the "thou shalt commit adultery." There were the Discharge Bible, the Triacle Bible, the Standing Fishes Bible, the Charing Cross Bible, and the rest. Aziraphale had them all, even the very rarest, a Bible published in 1651 by the London publishing firm of Bilton and Skaggs. It had been their first of three great publishing disasters. The book was commonly known as the Bugger All This Bible. The lengthy compositor's error, if such may be called, occurs in the book of Ezekiel, chapter 48, verse 5. And by the border of Dan, from the east side to the west side, a portion for Asher. And by the border of Asher, from the east side even unto the west side, a portion from Naphtali. And by the border of Naphtali, from the east side unto the west side, a portion from Manasseh. And bugger all this for a lark. I am sick to my heart of typesetting. Master Bilton is no gentleman. Master Skaggs is no more than a tight-fisted Southwark knob. I tell you, on a day like this, anyone with half an ounce of sense would be out there in the sunshine and not stuck here all the long day in this moldy old bar lady workshop. That part always cracks me up. I'm sorry. And there is actually an ad break. I will pause for just a moment. I do apologize for the ad break interrupting the course of human events, as they say. I hope y'all are enjoying this. I was trying to figure out to get your attention. Now, I actually looked up and saw. I was just in the middle of the sentence, and I didn't want to break off in the middle of the sentence. Because it pops up for me, too. So, honestly, the ad breaks won't be in the VOD, but at the same time, I don't want people who are not subbed to miss out on anything. So, I may even reread that passage, even though I keep a straight face while I'm doing it. That part's always so comical. And like I said, every Wednesday that I will be streaming, we will at least start the stream with this section of stuff. Ad break has been ended. Now to take it back up where I left off. Bugger all this for a lark. I am sick to my heart with typesetting. Master Bilton is no gentleman, and Master Skaggs no more than a tight-fisted Southwark knobfish. I tell you, on a day like this, anyone with half an ounce of sense should be out in the sunshine and not stuck here all live long day in this moldy old bar lady workshop. And then verse 6. And by the border of Ephraim, from the east side unto the west side, a portion for Reuben. And here is a footnote to this. The Booger All This Bible is also noteworthy for having 27 verses in the third chapter of Genesis instead of the more usual 24. They follow verse 24, in which the King James Version reads, "So he drove out the man, and he placed at the east of the garden of east cherubims, and a flaming sword which turned every way to keep the way of the tree of life, and read." Chapter 25. And the Lord spake unto the angel that guarded the eastern gate, saying, Where is the flaming sword which was given unto thee? 26. And the angel said, I had it here only a moment ago. I must have put it down here somewhere. Forget my own head next. 27. And the Lord did not ask him again. It appears that these verses were inserted during the proof stage. In those days, it was common practice for printers to hang proof sheets to the wooden beams outside their shops for the edification of the populace and free proofreading. And since the whole print was run subsequently burned anyway, no one bothered to take up this matter with the nice Mr. A. Zerofel, who ran the bookshop 2 doors along and was always so helpful with the translations, and whose handwriting was instantly recognizable. Milton and Skaggs, the second great publishing disaster, occurred in 1653. By a stroke of rare good fortune, they had obtained one of the famed lost quartos. The 3 Shakespeare plays never reissued in folio edition and now totally lost to scholars and playgoers. Only their names have come down to us. This is one of Shakespeare's earliest plays. The Comedy of Robin Hood or The Forest of Shedworth. And here's another footnote. The other 2 are The Trapping of the Mouse and The Gold Diggers of 1589. Master Bilton had paid almost 6 guineas for the quarto and believed he could make nearly twice that much back on the hardcover folio alone. Then he lost it. Bilton and Skaggs' third great publishing disaster was never entirely comprehensible to either of them. Everywhere you looked, books of prophecy were selling like crazy. The English edition of Nostradamus' Centuries had just gone into third printing, and 5 Nostradamuses, all claiming to be only the genuine one, were on triumphant signing tours. And Mother Shipton's collection of prophecies was sprinting out of the shops. Each of the great London publishers, there were 8 of them, had at least one book of prophecy on its list. Every single one of the books was wildly inaccurate, but their air of vague and generalized omnipotence made them immensely popular. They sold in the thousands and the tens of thousands. It is a license to print money, said Master Bilton to Master Skaggs. And here's another footnote. Who had already had a few thoughts in that direction and spent the last years of his life in Newgate Prison when he eventually put them into practice. The public are crying out for such rubbish. We must straightway print a book of prophecies by some hag. The manuscript arrived at their door the next morning. The author's sense of timing, as always, was exact. Although neither Master Bilton nor Master Skaggs realized that the manuscript they had been sent was the sole prophetic work in all of human history to consist entirely of completely correct predictions concerning the following 340-odd years, being a precise and accurate description of the events that would culminate in Armageddon. It was on the money in every single detail. It was published by Bilton and Skaggs in September of 1655 in good time for the Christmas trade. Here's a footnote. Another masterstroke of publishing genius, because Oliver Cromwell's Puritan Parliament made Christmas illegal in 1654. And it was the first book printed in England to be remandered. It didn't sell. Not even the copy in the tiny Lancashire shop with local author on a piece of cardboard next to it. The author of the book, one Agnes Nutter, was not surprised by this, but then again it would take an awful lot to surprise Agnes Nutter. Anyway, she had not written it for the sales or the royalties or even the fame. She had written it for the single gratis copy of the book that the author was entitled to. No one knows what happened to the legions of unsold copies of her book. Certainly none remain in any museums or private collections. Even Aziraphale does not possess a copy, but would go weak at the knees at the thought of actually getting his exquisitely manicured hands on one. In fact, only one copy of Agnes Nutter's prophecies remained in the entire world. It was on a bookshelf about 40 miles away from where Crowley and Aziraphale were enjoying a rather good lunch, and metaphorically, it had just begun to tick. And now it was 3 o'clock. The Antichrist had been on Earth for 15 hours, and one angel and one demon had been drinking solidly for 3 of them. I'll get to do my drunken voice. It's going to be great. They sat opposite one another in the back room of Aziraphale's dingy old bookshop in Soho. Most bookshops in Soho have back rooms, and most of the back rooms are filled with rare or at least very expensive books. But Aziraphale's books didn't have illustrations. They had old brown covers and crackling pages. Occasionally, if he had no alternative, he would sell one. And occasionally, a serious man in dark suits would come calling and suggest very politely that perhaps he'd like to sell the shop itself so that it could be turned into a kind of retail outlet more suited to the area. Sometimes they'd offer cash in large rolls of grubby 50-pound notes. Or sometimes while they were talking, other men in dark glasses would wander around the shop shaking their heads and saying about how inflammable paper was and what a fire trap he had here. Just because, and Aziraphale would nod and smile and say he'd think about it, and then they'd go away. And they would never come back. Just because you're an angel doesn't mean you have to be a fool. The table in front of them was covered with bottles. The, the point is, said Crowley, the point is, the point is, he tried to focus on Aziraphale. The point is, he said, and tried to think of a point. The point I'm trying to make, he said, brightening, is the dolphins. That's my point. Kind of fish, said Aziraphale. No, said Crowley, shaking a finger. Mammal. Your actual mammal. Differences. Crowley waded through the swamp of his mind and tried to remember the difference. Difference is they made out of water? Volunteered Aziraphale. Crowley's brow furrowed. Don't think so. Pretty sure it's not it. Something about their young. Whatever. He pulled himself together. The point is, their brains. He reached for a bottle. What about their brains, said the angel. Big brains. That's my point. Size of damn big brains. And then there's the whales. Brain City. Take it from me. Whole damn sea full of brains. Kraken, said Aziraphale, straight movement into his glass. Crowley gave him a long, cool look of someone who just had a girder dropped in front of his train of thought. Huh? Great big bugger, said Aziraphale. Sleepeth beneath the thunders of the upper deep. Underloads a huge, unnumbered bloody great seaweeds, you know. Supposed to rise to the surface right in where the sea boils. Yeah? Fact. Well, there you go then. There you are then, said Crowley, sitting back. Whole sea bubbling. Poor old dolphins, so much seafood gumbo, no one giving a damn. Same with gorillas. Whoops, they say, sky's got all red, stars crashing to the ground. What are they putting in the bananas these days? And then they make nests, you know, gorillas, said the angel, pouring another drink and managing to hit the glass on the third go. Nah. God's truth, I saw him. Nests. That's birds, said Crowley. Nests, insisted Aziraphale. Crowley decided not to argue the point. There you are then, he said. All creatures great and small. Great and small. A lot of them with brains. And then, bzam. But you're a part of it, said Aziraphale. You tempt people. You're good at it. Crowley thumped his glass on the table. That's different. They don't have to say yes. That's the ineffable bit, right? Your side made that up. You gotta keep testing people, but not to destruction. Alright. I don't like it anymore than you, but I told you, I can't, not do what I'm told. An angel. There's no theaters in heaven, said Crowley, and very few films. Don't you try to tempt me, said Aziraphale wretchedly. I know you, you serpent. Just you think about it, said Crowley relentlessly. You know where eternity is? You know what eternity is. I mean, you know what eternity is. There's this big mountain, see, a mile high, at the end of the universe, and once every 1,000 years, there's this little bird. What little bird? said Aziraphale suspiciously. This little bird I'm talking about, and every 1,000 years, same bird every 1,000 years? Crowley hesitated. Yeah, he said. Bloody ancient bird, then. Okay. Every 1,000 years, this bird flies, nymphs, flies all the way to this mountain and sharpens his beak. Hold on, you can't do that. Between here and the end of the universe, there's loads of... The angel waved a hand expansively, a little unsteadily. Loads of bugger all, dear boy. But it gets there anyway, Crowley persevered. How? It doesn't matter. It could use a spaceship, said the angel. Crowley subsided a bit. Yeah, he said, if you like. Anyway, this birth. Only if it's only it is the end of the universe we're talking about, says Aziraphale. So it'd have to be one of those spaceships where your descendants are the ones that get out there in the end. You have to tell your descendants, you say, when you get to the mountain, you got to, he hesitated, what do they gotta do? Sharpen its beak on the mountain, said Crowley, and then it flies back in the spaceship. And after 1,000 years, it goes and does it all again, said Crowley quickly. There was a moment of drunken silence. Seems a lot of effort just to sharpen a beak, Mr. Aziraphale. Listen, said Crowley urgently. The point is that when the bird has worn the mountain down to nothing, right? Aziraphale opened his mouth. Crowley just knew he was going to make some point about the relative hardness of birds' beaks and granite mountains, and plunged on quickly. Then you still won't have finished watching The Sound of Music. Aziraphale froze. And you'll enjoy it, Crowley said relentlessly. You really will. My dear boy, you won't have a choice. Listen, heaven has no taste. Now, not one single sushi restaurant. A look of pain crossed the angel's suddenly very serious face. I can't cope with this while I'm drunk, he said. I'm going to sober up. Me too. They both went and stepped the alcohol as the alcohol left their bloodstream and set up a bit more neatly. The Aziraphale straightened his tie. I can't interfere with divine plans, he croaked. Crowley looked speculatively into his glass and filled it again. What about diabolical ones, he said. Pardon? Well, it's got to be a diabolical plan, hasn't it? We're doing it, my side. But it's all part of the overall divine plan, said Aziraphale. Your side can't do anything without it being part of the ineffable divine plan, he added, with a trace of smugness. You wish. No, that's the... Aziraphale snapped his fingers irritably. The thing! What do you call it with your colorful idiom? The line at the bottom. The bottom line. Yes, that's it. If you're sure, said Crowley. No doubt about it. Crowley looked up slyly. Then you can't be certain, correct me if I'm wrong, you can't be certain that thwarting it isn't a part of the divine plan, too. I mean, you're supposed to thwart the wiles of the evil one every turn, aren't you? Aziraphale hesitated. There is that, yes. You see a wile, you thwart. Am I right? Broadly. Actually, I encourage humans to do the actual thwarting, but because of ineffability, you understand. Right. So all you got to do is thwart. Because if I know anything, said Crowley urgently, it's that the birth is just the start. It's the upbringing that's important. It's the influences. Otherwise, a child will never learn to use his powers. He hesitated. At least not necessarily as intended. Certainly our side won't mind thwarting you, said Aziraphale thoughtfully. They won't mind that at all. Right, it'd be a real feather in your wing. Crowley gave the angel an encouraging smile. What will happen to the child if it doesn't get a satanic upbringing, though, said Aziraphale. Probably nothing. It'll never know. But genetics. Don't tell me about genetics. What have they got to do with it? Said Crowley. Look, Satan. Look at Satan. Created as an angel, grows up to be the great adversary. Hey, if you're going to go on about genetics, you might as well say the kid would grow up to be an angel. After all, his father was really big in heaven in the old days. Saying he'll grow up to be a demon just because his dad became one is like saying a mouse with his tail cut off will give birth to tailless mice. No, upbringing is everything. Take it from me. And without unopposed satanic influences, well, at worst, hell will have to start all over again, and the earth gets at least another 11 years. That's got to be worth something, isn't it? Now, Aziraphale was looking thoughtful again. You're saying that the child isn't evil of itself, he said slowly. Potentially evil. Potentially good, too, I suppose. There's just this huge powerful potentiality waiting to be shaped, said Crowley. He shrugged. Anyway, why are we talking about this good and evil? They're just names for sides. We know that. Well, I suppose it's worth a try, said the angel. Crowley nodded encouragingly. Agreed? Said the demon, holding out his hand. The angel shook it cautiously. "It'll certainly be more interesting than Saints," he said. "And it'll be for the child's own good in the long run," said Crowley. "We'll be godfathers, sort of, overseeing his religious upbringing, you might say." Aziraphale beamed. "I never thought of that," he said. "Godfathers. Well, I'll be damned." "It's not that bad," said Crowley, "when you get used to it." She was known as Scarlet. At that time she was selling arms, although it was beginning to lose its savor. She never stuck at one job for very long, for 400 years at the outside. You didn't want to get into a rut. Her hair was true auburn, neither ginger nor brown, but deep burnished copper color, and it fell to her waist in tresses that men would kill for, and indeed often had. Her eyes were a startling orange. She looked 25 and always had. She had a dusty brick-red truck full of assorted weaponry and almost unbelievable skill at getting across any border in the world. She had been on her way to a small West African country where a minor civil war was in progress to make a delivery which would, with any luck, turn it into a major civil war. Unfortunately, the truck had broken down far beyond even her ability to repair it. She was very good at machinery these days. She was in the middle of a city, and here's a footnote. Normally a city, it was the size of an English country town, or translated into American terms, a shopping mall. The city in question was the capital of Kumbulaland, an African nation which had been peace for the last 3,000 years. For about 30 years it was Sir Humphrey Clarkson lands, but since the country had absolutely no mineral wealth and the strategic importance of a banana, it was accelerated toward self-government with almost unseemly haste. Kumbulaland was poor, perhaps, and undoubtedly boring, but peaceful. Its various tribes who got along with one another quite happily had long since beaten their swords into plowshares. A fight had broken out the city square in 1952 and between a drunken ox driver and an equally drunken ox thief. People were still talking about it. Scarlet yawned in the heat. She fanned her head with her broad-brimmed hat, left the useless truck in the dusty street, and wandered to a bar. She bought a can of beer, drained it, then grinned at the barman. "I got a truck needs repairing," she said. "Anyone around I can talk to?" The barman grinned white and huge and expansively. He'd been impressed by the way she drank her beer. "Only Nathan, miss, but Nathan's gone back to Kunda to see his father-in-law's farm." Scarlet bought another beer. "So this Nathan, any idea when he'll be back?" "Perhaps next week, perhaps 2 weeks' time, dear lady." "Oh, that Nathan, he's a scamp, huh?" He leaned forward. "You traveling alone, miss?" he said. "Yes. Could be dangerous. Some funny people on the roads these days. Bad men, not nice local boys," he added quickly. Scarlet raised a perfect eyebrow. Despite the heat, he shivered. "Thanks for the warning," Scarlet purred. Her voice sounded something like the lurks in the long grass, visible only by the twitching of its ears until something young and tender wobbles by. She tipped her hat to him and strolled outside. The hot African heat beat down on her. Her truck sat in the street with a cargo of guns and ammunition and landmines. It wasn't going anywhere. Scarlet stared at the truck. A vulture was sitting on its roof. It had traveled 300 miles with Scarlet so far. It was belching quietly. She looked around the street. A couple of women chatted on a street corner. A bored market vendor sat in front of a heap of colored gourds, fanning the flies. A few children played lazily in the dust. "What the hell," she said quietly. "I could do with a holiday anyway." That was Wednesday. By Friday, the city was a no-go area. By the following Tuesday, the economy of Kumbulaland was shattered. 20,000 people were dead, including the barman shot by rebels while storming the market barricades. Almost 100,000 people were injured. All of Scarlet's assorted weapons had fulfilled their function for which they had been created, and the vulture had died of recent degeneration. Scarlet was already on the last train out of the country. It was time to move on, she felt. She'd been doing arms for too damn long. She wanted to change, something with openings. She quite fancied herself a newspaper journalist, a possibility. She fanned herself with her hat and crossed her long legs in front of her. Farther down the train, a fight broke out. Scarlet grinned. People were always fighting. Over her and around her. It was rather sweet, really. Sable had black hair, a trimmed beard, and he had just decided to go corporate. He did drinks with his accountant. "How are we doing, Franny?" he asked her. 12 million copies sold so far. Can you believe that? They were doing drinks in a restaurant called Top of the Sixes at the top of 666 Fifth Avenue, New York. This was something that amused Sable ever so slightly. From the restaurant windows, you could see the whole of New York. At night, the rest of New York could see the huge red 666s that adorned all 4 sides of the building. Of course, it was just another street number. If you started counting, you'd be bound to get to it eventually, but you had to smile. Sable and his accountant had just come from a small, expensive, and particularly exclusive restaurant in Greenwich Village where the cuisine was entirely Nouvelle, a string bee, a pea, and a sliver of chicken breast aesthetically arranged on a square china plate. Sable had invented it the last time he had been in Paris. His accountant had polished her polished her meat and two veg off in under 50 seconds and spent the rest of the meal staring at the plate and cutlery and from time to time at her fellow diners in a manner that suggested she was wondering what they would taste like, which was in fact the case. It amused Sable enormously. He toyed with his Perrier. 12 million, huh? That's pretty good. That's great. So we're going corporate. It's time to blow the big one, am I right? California, I think. I want factories, restaurants, the whole schmear. We'll keep the publishing arm, but it's time to diversify, yeah? Brandy nodded. Sounds good, Sable. We'll need... She was interrupted by a skeleton. A skeleton in a Dior dress, with tan skin stretched almost to the snapping point over the delicate bones of her skull. The skeleton had long blonde hair and perfectly made-up lips. She looked like the person mothers around the world would point to, muttering, "That's what will happen to you if you don't eat your greens." She looked like a famine relief poster with style. She was New York's top fashion model, and she was holding a book. She said, "Excuse me, Mr. Sable, I hope you don't mind me intruding, but your book, it changed my life. I was wondering, would you mind signing it for me?" She stared imploringly at him with eyes deep sunk in gloriously eye-shadowed sockets. Sable nodded graciously and took the book from her. It was not surprising that she recognized it, for his dark gray eyes stared out from this photo on the foil embossed cover. Foodless Dining, Slim Yourself Beautiful, the book was called, the diet book of the century. "How do you spell your name?" he asked. "Cheryl, with 2 R's, 1 I, 1 L. You remind me of an old friend," he told her as he wrote swiftly and carefully on the title page. "There you go. Glad you liked it. Always good to meet a man." What he had written was this: Cheryl, a measure of wheat for a penny and 3 measures of barley for a penny, and see thou hurt not the oil and the wine. Revelation 6:6. Dr. Raven Sable. "It's from the Bible," he told her. She closed the book reverently and backed away from the table, thanking Sable. He didn't know how much this meant to her. He had changed her life. Truly he had. He had never actually earned the medical degree he claimed, since there had never been any universities in those days, but Sable could see she was starving to death. He gave her a couple of months on the outside. Foodless. Handle your weight terminally. Brandy was stabbing at her laptop computer hungrily, planning the next phase of Sable's transformation to eating habits of the Western world. Sable had bought her the five machine as a personal present. It was very, very expensive, very powerful, and ultra slim. He liked slim things. "There's a European outfit we can buy into for the initial toehold, Holdings Incorporated. That'll give us the Liechtenstein tax base. Now, if we channel funds out through the Caymans into Luxembourg, from there to Switzerland, we could pay for the factories." But Sable was no longer listening. He was remembering the exclusive little restaurant. It had occurred to him that he had never seen so many rich people so hungry. Sable grinned, the honest, open grin that goes with the job satisfaction, perfect and pure. He was just killing time until the main event. He was killing it in such exquisite ways. Time, and sometimes people. Sometimes he was called White, or Blanc, or Albus, or Chalky, or Weiss, or Snowy, or any one of the 100 of the names. His skin was pale, his hair a faded blonde, his eyes light gray. He was somewhere in his 20s at a casual glance, and a casual glance was all everyone ever gave him. He was almost entirely unmemorable. Blech, I can't talk to all of a sudden. Unlike his 2 colleagues, he could never settle down in any one job for very long. He had had all manner of interesting jobs in a lot of interesting places. He had worked at the Chernobyl power station, and at Windscale, and at 3 Mile Island, always in minor jobs that weren't very important. He had been a minor but valued member of a number of scientific research establishments. He had helped to design the petrol engine and plastics in the ring-pull can. He could turn his hand to anything. Nobody really noticed him. He was unobtrusive. His presence was cumulative. If you thought about it carefully, you could figure out he had been doing something. Had to have been somewhere. Maybe he even spoke to you. But he was easy to forget was Mr. White. At this time, he was working as a deckhand at an oil tanker heading toward Tokyo. I don't know if those of you that might know what this is alluding to. The captain was drunk in his cabin. The first mate was in the head. The second mate was in the galley. It was pretty much it for the crew. The ship was almost completely automated. There wasn't much a person could do. However, if a person just happened to press the emergency cargo release switch on the bridge, the automatic systems would take care of releasing huge quantities of black sludge into the sea, millions of tons of crude oil. With a devastating effect on birds, fish, vegetation, animals, and humans of the region. Of course, there was dozens of fail-safe interlocks and foolproof safety backups, but what the hell, there always were. Afterwards, there was a huge amount of arguments as to exactly whose fault it was, and in the end, it was left unresolved. The blame was apportioned equally. Neither the captain nor the first mate nor the second mate ever worked again. For some reason, nobody gave much thought to a Seaman White, who was already halfway to Indonesia on a tramp steamer piled high with rusting metal barrels of a particularly toxic weed killer. And then there was another. He was in the square of Kumbala Land. He was in the restaurants. He was in the fish in the air and the barrels of weed killer. He was on the roads and in the houses and the palaces and in hovels. There was nowhere he was a stranger, and there was no getting away from him. He was doing what he did best, and what he was doing was what he was. He was not waiting. He was working. I'm going to take a quick water break real quick. I hope y'all are enjoying this. I do sincerely hope so. I'm probably going to tap out here in about the next 15, though, and find a good stopping place and swap to gaming. I just need to take an actual water break instead of tea. Harriet Dowling returned home with her baby on the advice of Sister Faith Prolix, who was more persuasive than Sister Mary, and with a telephonic agreement of her husband she named Warlock. The cultural attaché returned home a week later and pronounced the baby the spit side of his family. He had also had a secretary advertising the lady for a nanny. Crowley had seen Mary Poppins on television one Christmas. Indeed, behind the scenes, Crowley had had a hand in most television, although it was on the invention of the game show that he truly prided himself. Don't tell Hunter. He toyed with the idea of a hurricane and as an effective and incredibly stylish way of disposing of the queue of nannies that would certainly form or possibly stack up in a holding pattern outside the cultural attaché's Regent Park residence. He contented himself with a wildcat tube strike, and when the day came, only one nanny show turned up. She wore a knit tweed suit and sweet pearl earrings. Something about her might have said nanny, but in an undertone of the sort employed by British butlers in a certain type of American film. It also coughed discreetly and muttered that she could well be the sort of nanny who would advertise as unspecified but strangely explicit services in certain magazines. Giggity. Her flat shoes crunched up the gravel drive, and a gray dog padded silently by her side, white flakes of saliva dripping from its jaw. Its eyes glinted scarlet and glanced from side to side hungrily. She reached the heavy wooden door, smiled to herself, a brief satisfied flicker, and rang the bell. It donged gloomily. The door was opened by a butler, as they say, of the old school. Here's a footnote. A night school just off the Tottenham Court Road, run by an elderly actor who had played butlers and gentlemen's gentlemen in films and television, and on the stage since the 1920s. I am Nanny Ashtoreth, she told him, and this, she continued with the gray dog at her side, eyed the butler carefully, working out perhaps where it would bury the bones, is Rover. She left the dog in the garden and passed her interview with flying colors, and Mrs. Dowling led the nanny to see her new charge. Ad break. We do apologize for this ad break. I will pause for just a moment. I'm going to see if there's a good stopping place. Okay. I'm actually almost to the beginnings. So this is just the 11 years ago part. And we're actually on page 53. So it's not bad. Not a bad vibe for this long a do. And it's taken about 2 hours. So that's not bad. The chapters will get smaller. It doesn't have traditional chapters. It has breaks. Good, Dan. Yeah, exactly. I'm going to take a minor stretch break while the ad break is on. I hope you like my little setup here. I think that was kind of cute. I just pulled that one picture from somewhere online. So I was like, you know what? That's actually a very representation. Well, I mean, I am a bard, right? So, I'm probably going to take a quick BRB before I start gaming. But yeah, I think I'm having a good time reading this to you guys, and I hope you're enjoying it. I figure it's like a nice departure, nice, and like I said, once I have a chance, I will section this off in again. So, highlight reel, upload to YouTube and Patreon. So, welcome back from the ad break. We shall continue. She left the dog in the garden and passed her interview with flying colors, and Mrs. Dowling led the nanny to see her new charge. Helps my eyes and headache. That's good. She smiled unpleasantly. What a delightful child, he said. He'll be wanting a little tricycle soon. By one of those coincidences, another new member of the staff arrived the same afternoon. He was the gardener, and as it turned out, he was amazingly good at his job. No one quite worked out how this should be the case, since he never seemed to pick up a shovel or made no effort to rid the garden of the sudden flocks of birds that filled it and settled all over him at every opportunity. This confirms that Aziraphale is a Disney princess. Anyway, go ahead. He just sat in the shade while around him the resident gardens bloomed and bloomed. Warlock used to come down to see him, and when he was old enough to toddle, and Nanny was doing whatever it was she was doing on her afternoons off. This here's Brother Slug, the gardener would tell him, and this tiny little critter's Sister Potato Weevil. Remember, Warlock, as you walk your way through the highways and byways of life's rich and fulsome path to have love and reverence for all living things. Nanny says that living things is only fit to be wound under my heels, Mr. Francis, said little Warlock, stroking Brother Slug, and then wiping his hands conscientiously on his Kermit the Frog overall. You don't listen to that woman, Francis would say. You listen to me. At night, Nanny Asher sang nursery rhymes to Warlock. Oh, the grand old Duke of York. He had 10,000 men. He marched them up the top of the hill and crushed all the nations of the world and brought them under the rule of Satan our master. And this little piggy went to Hades. This little piggy stayed home. This little piggy ate raw and steaming human flesh. This little piggy violated virgins. And this little piggy clambered over a heap of dead bodies to get to the top. Not exactly your Grimm's fairy tales, right? Wilful Francis, the gardener, says I must selflessly practice virtue and love all living things, said Warlock. You don't listen to that man, darling, Nanny would whisper as she tucked in her little bed. You listen to me. And so it went. The arrangement went perfectly, a no-score win. Nanny Ashworth brought the child a little tricycle and never could persuade him right inside the house, and he was scared of Rover. In the background, Crowley and the Aziraphale met on the tops of buses and in art galleries and concerts, compared notes and smiled. When Warlock was 6, his nanny left, taking Rover with her. The gardener handed in his resignation on the same day. Neither of them left with quite the same spring in their step with which they arrived. Warlock now found himself being educated by 2 tutors. Mr. Harrison taught him about Attila the Hun, Vlad Dracul, and the darkness intrinsic in the human spirit. And here's the footnote. He avoided mentioning that Attila was nice to his mother and that Vlad Dracul was punctilious about saying his prayers every day. He tried to teach Warlock how to make rabble-rousing political speeches to sway the hearts and minds of the multitudes. Mr. Cortez taught him about Florence Nightingale, and here's another footnote, except for the bits about the syphilis. River. Abraham Lincoln and the appreciation of art. Oh my God. Sorry about that, guys. He tried to teach him about free will, self-denial, and doing unto others as you would wish them to do to you. They both read to the child extensively from the Book of Revelation. Despite their best efforts, Warlock showed a regrettable tendency to be good at maths. Neither of his tutors was entirely satisfied with his progress. I know, bork. I am so sorry for that. When Warlock was 10, he liked baseball. He liked plastic toys that transformed into other plastic toys, indistinguishable from the first set of plastic toys, except for to the trained eye. He liked his stamp collection. He liked banana-flavored bubblegum. He liked comics and cartoons and his BMX bike. In other words, he was a human kid. Crowley was troubled. They were in the cafeteria of the British Museum, another refuge for all weary foot soldiers of the Cold War. At the table to their left, 2 ramrod straight Americans in suits were surreptitiously handing over a briefcase full of deniable dollars to a small, dark woman in sunglasses. At the table on the right, the deputy head of MI7 and the local KGB section officer argued over who got to keep the receipt for the tea and buns. Crowley finally said what he had not even dared to think for the last decade. If you ask me, Crowley said to his counterpart, he's too bloody normal. Aziraphale popped another deviled egg into his mouth and washed it down with coffee. He dabbed his lips with a paper napkin. It's my good influence, he beamed, or rather, credit where credit's due, that of my little team. Crowley shook his head. I'm taking that into account. Look, by now he should be trying to warp the world around into his own desires, shaping it in his own image, that kind of stuff. Well, not actually trying. He'll do it without even knowing it. Have you seen any evidence of that happening? Well, no, but by now he should be a powerhouse of raw force. Is he? Well, not as far as I've noticed, but he's too normal. Crowley drummed his fingers on the table. I don't like it. There's something wrong. I just can't put my finger on it. Aziraphale helped himself to Crowley's slice of angel cake. Well, he's a growing boy, and of course there's been the heavenly influence in his life. Crowley sighed. I just hope he'll know how to cope with the hellhound, that's all. Aziraphale raised one eyebrow. Hellhound? On his 11th birthday, I received a message from hell last night. The message had come during the Golden Girls, one of Crowley's favorite television programs. Rose had taken 10 minutes to deliver what could have been quite a brief communication, and by the time the non-infernal service had been restored, Crowley had quite lost the thread of the plot. They're sending him a hellhound to pad by his side and guard him from all harm. Biggest one they've got. Won't people remark on the sudden appearance of a huge black dog? His parents, for a start. Crowley stood up suddenly, treading on the foot of a Bulgarian cultural attaché who was talking animatedly to her keeper of Her Majesty's Antiquities. Nobody's going to notice anything. Hang on. Fucking ant. Nobody's going to notice anything out of the ordinary. It's reality, Angel, and young Warlock can do what he wants to that, whether he knows it or not. When does it turn up, then, this dog? Does it have a name? I told you, on his 11th birthday, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, it'll sort of home in on him. He's supposed to name it himself. It's very important that he names it himself. It gives it its purpose. It'll be killer or terror or stalks by night, I expect. Are you going to be there? asked the Angel nonchalantly. Wouldn't miss it for the world, said Crowley. I do hope there's nothing too wrong with the child. We'll see how he reacts to the dog anyway. That should tell us something. I hope he'll send it back, or be frightened of it. If he does name it, we've lost. He'll have all his powers, and Armageddon is just around the corner. I think, said Aziraphale, sipping his wine, which had just ceased to be a slightly vinegary Beaujolais, and had become a quite acceptable but rather surprised Chateau Lafitte, 1875. I think I'll see you there. And that, my friends, is where we're going to stop for the day. Because that brings us up to the 11-year mark. So, and we'll see what happens with Warlock and Adam and the Hellhound and all the stuff that will happen forthwith. But I almost went almost 2 hours reading to you guys, and I do hope you enjoyed the segment. I will be better prepared hopefully next time I do this, because it won't be. I think I have to work next Wednesday, so it's either next Tuesday or next Wednesday. So if I am not working that Wednesday, I will continue, and I will hopefully be prepared with something a little bit better to drink than just ordinary stuff, because 2 hours is probably my limit. I thought I could do this for a whole stream, but I don't think I can. Not if I'm going to go 4 or 5 hours. But I'm going to go BRB. I'm going to pull up. I'm going to change. The reason it's on Just Chatting is because there's not really a book reading category for I could tell. I couldn't find one. So, but I am going to do a quick BRB. I'm going to walk around, get me a little bit more something to drink. And I am going to sort of, segment out the section. And I will be back with some Dreamlight Valley, and I will be in my voice chat. So it'll be an open BC, so I hope folks will come and hang out and stuff. But I will be right back.